Hey everybody, welcome to another Think With Me Thursday. Actually on Thursday today, just doing a different setup today I'm using my Mac, and so I'm trying to work out a couple technical things in the midst of all of this. So if there's anything wrong, do let me know in the chat. I would definitely, it looks like potentially I've got a little bit of video lag going on. So if that's the case, let me know, please. I'll work on trying to get that fixed over the course of the stream here. But it's great to be back doing some streaming. I know my schedule has been all over the place. Haven't really been able to get into doing much streaming. It's been hard to find the time to break away and actually do something live, let alone record videos and things of that sort. So it's good to be back doing this today. One thing that has been going on lately, though, is I've been studying to take my CSM exam, which is the Certified Scrum Master exam. And so what I wanted to do today a little bit on the stream is actually go through that. And if you see me looking down, I have my laptop down below here. So I'm just checking stuff on the stream, making sure that it's looking okay. I've got chat up here too. So I'm going to be doing a little bit of studying for this on stream. There's two things I'm looking to do. One is going through and just doing a review of the Scrum Guide, kind of talking through it a little bit on stream. And then the other thing that I want to do, if we have some time, is... Oh, geez. Okay, YouTube's throwing a fit. YouTube is not receiving a smooth stream. Okay, that's a bit of a bummer. Let me take a look at this here real quick. Hold on just a minute. Stream Elements is finally up and running too. Yay. Yeah, so I have to figure this out. If it becomes too unusable, I'll spend a little bit more time with this. Let me know in the chat, by the way, if it's kind of buffering a lot. Apologize for that in advance. I just kind of hopped on my Mac here as I decided to change out my computers recently that I'm using for video production on this desk that I have set up here. But the two things I want to do today, as I mentioned, is I want to go through the Scrum Guide. I'm going to use Readwise Reader to highlight that, kind of go through that process. I'm going to actually try to upload it into Reader itself and see how that works. And the other thing that I want to do is I have a bunch of notes from a course that I took inside of Obsidian that I want to organize a little bit. And so we'll dig into some of that on today's stream. While we're getting going here, do let me know where you're from, where you're tuning in from. I would love to hear from you. And if you've been around these streams before, you've been around the channel before, be sure if you find the content valuable to hit that like button. It does help other folks find these live streams and content on this channel. Yeah, it's looking like I am getting kind of choppy here. So again, I apologize about that. I'm going to just take a quick look and see at my streaming settings here in OBS. Looks like I can't adjust them while I am streaming. That's a little bit of a bummer. Okay. Poor. I'm just going to check this on my phone real quick. So hold on just a moment here. Live troubleshooting together here. Actually, I'm going to do it on my iPad. Hold on a sec. See how we're doing. All right. Just going to check in the stream quality. Yeah, it's really choppy. Apologize for that for anybody tuning in. I'm going to try to sort this out here real quick. OBS. Here, let's just do some live troubleshooting here on screen. I'll just pop over to my desktop. Let's see. OBS, M1, Mac, streaming settings. Let's figure this out. Reddit, always a good place to go. Okay. hardware encoder. That might be why I am having some difficulties here. Is that I don't have... Yeah, this is X2.64. I'm going to stop the stream here for a minute. I'll be back in just a moment. Hang tight. Okay. Looks like we're back. Going to try to figure out all this stuff here. Thanks for hanging tight with me. I've got a little stream encoding type stuff that I'm trying to deal with here. Yeah, I'm just checking in on the iPad to see how it's working. Looks like it's working quite a bit better now that I changed that. So, okay, cool. Well, if there's any further issues, let me know in the chat. We can take a couple minutes to figure that out. So with that, I'm going to just start diving in here, and we're going to get on over to the desktop. I'm going to move around my face so that it's over here instead of on top of the content. So again, I'm studying for my Certified Scrum Master certification. That's a mouthful. But I'm going to go through the Scrum Guide here, scrumguides.org. If you're not familiar what Scrum is, Scrum, as it says here on the page, is a framework for developing and sustaining complex products. A lot of folks think of Scrum as something that is to do with software development, and that's partially true. Scrum and Agile really kind of came out of the software world because software tends to move pretty quickly, technology tends to move pretty quickly, but it's actually very, very applicable to non-software, non-technology related processes. The group that I'm working with right now is very business process heavy, but it is a product type of a group. And so there is some validity in it kind of still being in the tech space to some degree, but I actually really think this process, Scrum, has a lot of value to it. And so because it allows for agility, like traditional project management philosophy is around the waterfall approach, and a lot of folks in the productivity space tend to think about project management in this modality of thinking as well. You kind of take your end goal and you plan all of the milestones that you need to get there, but that doesn't always work out. This is one of the main challenges that I have had in the productivity world with managing my own projects, is that I get a vision for where I want to be somewhere in the future, but it's really difficult to lay out the map to get there without first starting the journey. Agile and Scrum, that methodology really takes that into consideration. If you're not familiar with the process of Scrum, you have a sprint, which is a period of anywhere from like 1 week up to 1 month. And then you iterate and you basically create a backlog of items to work on to get toward a product goal for that sprint. You execute, you review, and you basically iterate both on the product itself, figuring out and adjusting every 2 weeks generally is the length of a sprint, or the other thing that happens as part of this Scrum process is the retrospective, which allows you to reflect as a team on how you can do your work better. And I think this is one of the interesting things that's relevant, most importantly, to productivity altogether, is taking that time to reflect on what went well, what didn't go so well, what could go better, are there new improvements that we could try, things of that sort. And you'd be doing this with yourself. I do this a little bit also personally in my annual reviews that I do. If you haven't checked it out before, I have a guide at annualreviewtemplate.com, which actually is my template that I use. There's also a video here on the YouTube channel that dives into the specifics of how I do this process. It's not Scrum really, but it's just a reflection point that I like to take once a year to make sure that I'm keeping on track with where I want to be. So with that, let's get into the Scrum Guide. I am going to do just a lot of highlighting in here and reviewing and careful reading of it because I'm taking my certification test tomorrow. So I'm going to highlight this into Reader, and I'm going to open it up over there as well. This is the first time I've done this on stream. Actually, this product is Readwise's reader product. And so this actually came in here quite nicely. I'm going to try to get this into light mode really quick, just so it's a little bit easier to see on stream. And yeah, looks great. On the website, there's a table of contents, and this has one over here as well, which is really nice. I haven't uploaded a guide like this into Reader. So I'm just going to kind of move through this and highlight and take some notes. This will get synced into my Obsidian vault through Reader and Readwise. And then the other thing that I want to try to do today, as I mentioned, is doing some work on the actual Readwise or Obsidian note that I have from training as well. So let's dig in. If you have any questions or interesting thoughts or things you're wondering about, be sure to pop them in the chat. We'll talk about it on the way. Some people might argue on this that Scrum is not a lightweight framework because it actually introduces 5 different types of meetings into your calendar. But if it's effectively managed well, it can actually be an effective way to do it. Hey, Clement, welcome to see. Glad to see you on the stream here. And yes, I actually am in the process of studying to be a certified Scrum Master. I took a class this week, and I'm taking a test to get my certification this week. It's kind of cool because it's a business case that for the work that I'm doing right now, and so it makes a ton of sense. I'm going to be helping a team that I'm working with kind of implement some Scrum. It's going to be more in a Kanban focus versus a full-on agile Scrum sprint model, but really been fun to kind of learn about it. It's been tying a lot of productivity ideas into a bigger picture, which has been kind of cool. So it's a lightweight framework. Again, some people might argue one way or the other on that, depending on how it's managed. If it's managed well, it can be relatively lightweight and move things forward. Helps people, teams, and organizations generate value through adaptive solutions for complex problems. Something that I want to tie in here as well is the concept of range by David Epstein. I'm just putting a note there for myself because this idea of adaptive solutions for complex problems is directly related to what Epstein is talking about in terms of generalists and being able to learn broadly from a variety of different backgrounds. That is one of the things that he talks about is that in that book is that there are no low-hanging fruit problems anymore in our world. They've all basically been dealt with. And the problems we're facing now are very complex. And so Scrum is an interesting tool that you could pull out of the toolbox to use if you have teams of people or organizations to develop these types of adaptive solutions for more complex problems. It's a very knowledge worker centric methodology, and I think that's interesting. Scrum Master to foster an environment so the Scrum Master is the person who fosters the environment. They're not necessarily the ones doing the work, though sometimes they can be. There's a product owner who orders the work and kind of manages the direction of the product in a product backlog. Then there's the Scrum team, which is the combination of the product owner, the Scrum Master, and the developers. They work together to turn a selection of work into what's called an increment, which is a chunk of work that could potentially be used, and it generates value. That's the other thing is that I really like about Scrum, and I think this is one thing I am pulling out from Scrum to apply to my own productivity methodology, whether you use the anything else out of it. Personally, I don't think that matters as much as somebody else or as this one thing, and that is the goal of Scrum is to generate value, like create value. And if you know what creating value looks like for yourself, then determining what is on your list for things to do in a given week, I think that is a really interesting approach, frankly. It gives you a nice defined filter. Does this thing that I am doing create value for myself or someone else in some way? And that is a great filter I'm going to start implementing into my own thought process in terms of productivity. Clement's asking, what are your thoughts about the article from, not sure how to pronounce the name, but how big tech runs tech projects and curious absence of Scrum? I have not read that yet, but I'm going to look it up. And I'm going to save it for later. I'll have a look at that at some point. Sometimes it seems like the way that tech tends to run projects is kind of scattershot. There's an approach where it seems like they pull ideas from different methodologies into kind of its own thing. Or either that is just kind of slapping at stuff until it gets done. Scrum is simple. Try it as it is and determine if it's philosophy, theory, and structure to help achieve goals and value. The Scrum framework is purposefully incomplete, only defining the parts required to implement Scrum theory. So this is the interesting part about Scrum, and specifically the Scrum guide and the Scrum certification tests that I'm learning about, is that the Scrum guide doesn't define a bunch of things that are kind of best practice. So for example, the Scrum guide doesn't say one way or the other if you should be a part of multiple Scrum teams. So technically, under the guidance of the Scrum guide, you can. But best practice, if you've been around the block a few times, you will probably know that being a part of multiple projects that are deeply involved at one time is not going to be all that effective and productive for you or for the team. And so there could be questions on the test that are kind of indicative of that thought process. And so it's been interesting to try to figure out what's not mentioned in the Scrum guide and what is. Because I know the Scrum is really built upon empiricism and lean thinking, as it says down here. So it's all of that, what in practice has actually worked and not. And this allows teams to find the way that works best for them to work together, which is really cool. But then also keeping it lean, not adding extra stuff in that is not helpful, that's not important. Scrum is built by the collective intelligence of the people using it. This gets into the Scrum values here a little bit. Scrum makes visible the relative efficacy of current management. So making it visible, Scrum theory, one of the values is transparency. other inspection and adaptation. The transparency really comes in with the backlog side of things, where you have a full product backlog of everything we know that we might want to do with this product. You have a product goal, which is the direction, somewhat short-term, medium-term, where you want that product to end up being, and that's transparency as well. The sprint backlog and the sprint goal are also aspects of transparency. Inspection and adaptation are come together in different events inside of the Scrum framework, such as down here, the planning, daily Scrum, review, and retrospective. These are all times where you come together to say, hey, what has worked, what hasn't worked, where are we going next, what's the right thing for us to be working on, and then adapting and making those changes on the fly as needed. Just going to highlight these separately since they're separate definitions. Iterative incremental approach, optimize predictability, and to control risk. These events work because they implement the empirical Scrum pillars of transparency, inspection, and adaptation. Yeah, so it's all about the process and work being visible. This is one thing that it can get really difficult in organizations to know exactly what people are doing when you don't have transparency, when you're not building a transparent system for work to be done in. I think this is part of why Cal Newport focuses a lot on this in his book, A World Without Email. I think a lot of what he is doing inside of that book, thinking through these systems that are more pull-based, that allow people the flexibility to kind of create their own workday in a sense where they can focus deeply. So many of those ideas, I don't know, I haven't read the book fully yet, but so many of those ideas seem to be rooted in a lot of previous thought about work and efficiency and collaborating together. I know he really wants to just eliminate emails back and forth altogether, pointless communications in some regards, which is the point of that book. But a lot of the underlying theory is put everything in a place where everyone can see it. That's where all of the updates go with where the project is at, what is going on with it, and then you can have a defined cadence that allows you to engage with that work and talk with each other versus having 20 emails come in about the status of something over the course of a week. Clement's asking, what's my experience with Scrum so far? Honestly, just a little bit in particular of it. I have picked up a bit of knowledge about agile practices over the course of years. I've worked for a couple of different companies that have been more lean focused. One company that's been very agile focused. I've done a little bit of Scrum work in general. It wasn't fully implemented. It was more of an experiment that we were running at a consulting company that I was working for. But it really helped kind of develop the flow of things. So I don't have a ton of long-term experience with Scrum. But what I do have experience with so far is tying a lot of these ideas from my research and experience in the productivity world, right, and in past leadership experiences that I've had, tying that directly into Scrum itself. What I think is really interesting about the Scrum Master aspect of things is that it's about facilitating people getting work done. It's not necessarily about optimizing process yourself, but it's helping people optimize the process. That's what I find the most interesting and intriguing about it, is that idea of being able to come alongside the team and being able to coach, to help facilitate, and to help train in better. I mean team productivity and effectiveness practices. I'm really enjoying that aspect of it so far, and a lot of it is going to be building some of that, which is really helpful too. Yeah, Clement, what's been your experience with it? Has it been a positive or a negative thing to implement Scrum or use Scrum? And what side of things have you been at it from? You've been more on the developer side of things or the contributor side, product owner, Scrum Master? What does that look like for you? I'd love to hear. All right. Inspection. So you have to look at your progress frequently and diligently. And then there are artifacts too. The artifacts are the backlogs and the increment. Adaptation. I don't know if I'm going to read through all of this right now because I definitely want to spend some time going through my notes. There's some consolidation that I want to do with some of that here in the next couple minutes. Values, I think, is really interesting. Commitment, focus, openness, respect, and courage. It's not a huge component of it. It's more of an ideal. Yeah, kind of losing steam on that. So I'm actually going to hop into my notes from the course that I took this week. Okay, Clement saying quite positive. It was a developer, team lead, a bit of project manager. Can't compare with other ways to work though. Well, that's all right. I think we can all kind of get a sense of, even if we've only been doing one thing, if it works or if it doesn't. So yeah. So the CSM training that I took was from a company called Applied Frameworks. They did a really fantastic job of it. If you've been around streams before, you know that I like Miro, which is a whiteboarding application. They actually used Miro to conduct the training, which I thought was really helpful. It was done over Zoom and Miro, and you'd use breakout rooms. I thought that was a really fun way to handle things because there was a lot of interactivity as part of the training. So what I'm looking at doing here is I am going to plan to, there's a couple of different sections that I want to break out into individual notes. So I am going to just try to figure out the best way to do that. I definitely want to. Goodness, I haven't been using Obsidian as much. Here, Note Refactor, that's the name of it. Oops. So Clement, to answer your question, environment, will I start Scrum? It's an established team, 10-ish people, very democratic management style, so it's a good environment to do it in. They're really on board with it. The larger organization that I'm a part of also, it has committed to Agile methodology, and so there's a lot of support there as well, which is really, really helpful. Let's see here. I'm actually kind of wondering how I want to handle this on a technical aspect of things. I think I might want to. Here we go. I'm going to probably do a bunch of embedding in this note. did this. Try. Try this here. I thought this was an important point as well in the course, that you can know the mechanics of Scrum, but if you don't instill the values of Scrum, you're missing the point. The values are what drive the engine that is the overall process of Scrum. Okay, did this. So there's a lot of This is going to be interesting to try to consolidate all of this or pull notes out. I had some ideas the other day, but it honestly didn't really connect with me. Getting in here just now, I was like, oh, I could do that, but I'm not even really seeing how to do that effectively right now. I'm going to just zoom in so it's a little easier to see on the stream. Okay, yeah, got some to-dos in here that I think will be helpful. Okay, all right. I'm also going to pull definitions out, I think. That I think is really helpful to do that. Hey, Jason. Welcome. Oh, cool. Clement, I'll have to check out, I'll add it to my note right here. Listen to Scrum Master Toolbox podcast. Okay. Oh, where did that go? Scouting rule. Okay. No, I haven't seen that, Jason. I'll have to take a look at this list callouts plugin sometime. In fact, let me just pull it up quick. Getting distracted now. List callouts. Oh, that's really, really nice. So it's similar to the admonition type stuff that's now built into Obsidian, except it's just for lists. That's really helpful. characters or icons. I like it. Why not install it? Don't know if I'll use it yet, but I'll install it anyway. Yeah, that's really helpful to have just a symbol right in front of a list item to call something out. It depends on the type of note that I'm taking. I don't always use bullet lists inside of my vault, but like for example, up here, when things list out appropriately, I think that makes a lot of sense. But in the context of doing like bullet journaling, I use lists all the time. And so having a symbol up front that can denote, like you're talking about using a question in front of a list item, makes it clear that it's a question to yourself. That can be really helpful, just to denote something really easily in a note. Okay. Yeah, so this was a little, like looking back on this, the way that I took these notes, I thought it was going to be a little easier. I'm just going to call this thumb voting, also known as Roman voting. To help. Just going to change that to a capital. I almost feel like this aspect here could probably be a node in and of itself. Pull out. How do I want to do that? Oh yeah, that's the right shortcut. Okay. Permanent node template. Refer to this from the CSM training. I'm going to pop range in there too, just because we were mentioning that earlier. I'm also going to embed that there. I thought this was an interesting point to pull out from the training, talking about people like Scrum because of cadence and predictability. That people love patterns. The interesting point here, though, is that people's minds don't tend to work in uneven cadences. So if you have a meeting every third week, people get off and say, oh, do we actually have this meeting this week, or is it next week, or was it last week? I don't even remember. So having it in even cadences, whether it's every 4 weeks or every 2 weeks, people can keep track of that a little bit more easily. I thought that was an interesting point. Do that. All right. If you have Yeah, Clement, it's just really it's true. I found this myself because there have been times where things have been on uneven cadences or odd cadences. That it's just been really hard to figure out. Hey, am I actually doing that thing this week? Thankfully, calendars can help with that, but it can be difficult to keep on top of things mentally. Complexity Nerd, thanks for joining the stream today. You just read through your chat here. Saw the stream at 2x. I like the idea of researching live. Super interesting about how all the low-hanging fruit problems in this day and age have already been solved. Only complex remain. Yeah, I definitely recommend checking out David Epstein's book Range, where he kind of dives into that in part, and he talks about why people are we need to kind of shift the balance of the type of workers that we have in our society away from hyper specialized only to a balance of specialized people with generalists, because it's the generalists who can help kind of flip up into the big picture to see potential solutions to problems from cross-domain knowledge. I find it really interesting, to be honest with you. Jason says, my favorite part of sprint-based workflow is the same as the game design principle of one-way values. When a game drops you into a space and you can't get back, it's a mental cleanse. You won't get lost because the past stream is not relevant. A sprint lets you finish and reset the goals now, not carry over and stress about a long-running problem as you reevaluate. You know what, Jason? That's actually really interesting, and I think that's part of why productivity and the typical like getting things done / to-do list system, why it doesn't work for some people very well, is because it's a constant, there's no check-in point that says, hey, you're done with this thing. It's just a constant slog forward. You know, that's why there's such a heavy emphasis on you have to have goals, you have to have habits, because in a typical productivity system and in a typical work environment, there are no milestones, and there's no points where you can stop and celebrate. You have to define those for yourselves. And so if the system that you're working within can define some of those endpoints and say, hey, everything before today, don't worry about it. We're focusing on this one thing going forward. And all the big picture stuff is tracked, so you don't have to lose sight of it, but you're really just focusing in on this one subset of that this week, and then we can readjust going forward. I think it really takes the burden off of people's shoulders to have to manage productivity for themselves. And so I'm kind of wondering that, popping back to the ideas that Cal Newport has in A World Without Email, he's really trying to search for this kind of magic bullet solution that will help companies figure out this, hey, we can't do the 8 hours a day on Zoom anymore and then do another 12 hours of email after that. there's a lot of that happens in the work world. But I think some of the solutions that he's trying to hit at with that already exist. Clement says, the thing with Scrum is you can learn all tools and base, and then it all depends on which problem the team is facing 100%. And goes on to say, what I like with sprints is the fact that we're forced to split work into doable parts with a sprint. Yeah, I think that's a big component too, is that you are forced to think about, is this actually completable? And I think where part of the getting things done methodology kind of falls apart is that you just kind of throw all this stuff into a system, but you don't really give consideration to, is this actually doable? And you don't time box any of it. I know time boxing on the schedule is kind of a trendy thing on a day-to-day basis, but there's really an element to what are you focusing on over a period of time and trying to time box that in. Jason says, 100% I fell off on getting things done, but did a lot better with Tiago Forte's Para because you archive a project or add it to areas and lets you focus on 1 to 3 projects. Lets me not feel bad about putting something away and cleansing my brain and keeping my priorities on 1 or 2 things that I can pull out of the bin later and dust off, reevaluate when the time is right. Yeah, I mean, I think that's really great. I know getting things done works for some people, and that's awesome. Sometimes you got to really hone in and focus on what works for you, and other people, it just doesn't work. Interestingly enough, I've kind of popped back into a getting things done style system for at least the time being because the volume of small things that I needed to do was actually increasing. And so I needed a better system to track those small things versus the big things that I'm moving forward. And so that is part of why I have focused on getting things done system right now. I think it really excels at, here are all of these small things that you need to do and move forward. And it does a really good job of handling that. I don't think getting things done does a really good job of pulling up to the big picture. I know it's part of David Allen's methodology and thought process, the horizons of focus, but it's really hard when you build everything from the ground layer. It's really hard to focus on that from to get up to the big picture from there. Sure, you can see all of the trees that you have, but it's hard to make sense of the forest sometimes unless you can really kick into a big picture oriented mindset. Miguel says, what's the most demanded language? Not sure what questioning you're asking there. Jason says, I will say whenever I feel unmotivated and unproductive, getting things done in the form of sitting in a coffee shop, writing my captures of all my open loops is really good at kickstarting motivation. 100% agree. I actually just wrote a newsletter on this exact thing this week. I termed it the rubber duck, but it's really a mind sweep. It's a way of getting stuff out. I got stuck recently where I was just completely stuck. I wasn't sure where to go. I wasn't sure what to do with my life in a lot of respects. And I had to sit down and just get everything out of my head, because if I don't do that, I'm trying to process it all up here. And when I try to process it all up here, it doesn't go very well for the long term. Short term, I can do it, but I'm remembering again that I have to get stuff out of my head into some kind of an external environment, whether it's talking to another person where there's an external conversation happening, or I'm imagining an external conversation happening, whether it's on a whiteboard, in a journal style note in Obsidian where I'm just typing through everything, or if I'm sitting down with my iPad in Good Notes or OneNote or something like that and just drawing it out. Otherwise, I get completely overwhelmed and I can't decide. I can't think creatively. I can't do any of that. And so that, I think, is a really big component to being successful with a productivity system, one, and for two, just living in today's modern world, as having a practice, not of just journaling. I think journaling itself has a lot of benefits, but of really digging into what's on your mind and trying to get it all out. I've been trying to sit down for 5-10 minutes before I start work in the morning and just writing out everything that I'm thinking about. Sometimes it's a lot, sometimes it's a little. Like this morning, there was maybe 5 or 10 items that I just got out. It wasn't like a bullet list of to-do items. I was literally writing out whatever I was thinking, like a stream of consciousness type journaling. And that really helped me kind of pick up, see what was there, and then move forward on it. Cool, complexity nerd. I'm really glad to hear that. I'm glad that's resonating with you. I very much, it's a process to keep on top of that for me. But I've definitely been getting there. Excuse me just a second while I check a text message. All right. Jason saying that was the one revelation in getting things done. It was the book that really attribute to my entire PKM journey. The idea of a trusted system. Your brain is not a trusted system. It's loose and rewrites itself. I think that's a really excellent point, that it does rewrite itself. I think that's a really interesting approach and thought to it, because it is really good for making connections. I'm very much a proponent of the idea of leveraging all the different aspects of yourself and the tools that you have at hand. I don't like the idea that is often insinuated at times in the current PKM focused productivity world, that you have to have the tools do the work for you. There's kind of this mentality of, Obsidian needs to be able to show me these connections between ideas, or there's this AI tool that needs to show me or surface these notes. I mean, while the tooling can be a benefit in that regard, I do think that it can be a little too far for a tool to put the onus on a tool to do the hard creative work for you. The way that I tend to think about a PKM tool like Obsidian or OmniFocus even is that it's a place for me to externalize my thoughts. It's an external canvas that I can now interact with them in a different way, because they're no longer in my head and they're actually there on paper or in the software. So like I've been doing here on the notes with this, there's no way that I would have been able to remember all of this stuff by myself without taking notes. I can come back, I can review it, I can remix it, I can put it in different places, but Obsidian can't do this for me. I am the one who has to make the creative decisions on how these notes are going to get organized. I'm the one who has to make these decisions and make these connections. I mean, it's learning. It's really the thought process that I have around PKM, which is learning, thinking, and creating. It's really no more complex than that. You're taking in external information from other people. You're processing on it and thinking and making connections with it with other ideas. And then you're taking it and you're making something with it, whether you're actually creating something artistic or productive, like a YouTube video or something that you're actually creating, or you're helping a team implement Scrum better for the first time and you're bettering yourself. That's a creative act as well. And so I think, like you're saying, Jason, I'll just read it out loud on stream here. Hot take, I kind of hate this new AI PKM stuff. As Nick Milo would say, that is note-taking, not note-making. It incentivizes noise and content for the sake of content, not mental clarity. Yeah, and I would even take a different stab at that. I think in the right context, an AI note-taking tool could be really helpful. For example, I am a Readwise user. I love Readwise. I use it. I flip open and do a review in there every single day. If that tool enabled AI surfacing a little bit more clearly, for example, if it maybe tuned some of the things that I've been reading more often or was more interested in a little bit more through AI, I would find that really helpful, and potentially like categorizing those things, as Clement's saying in the chat, AI tagging notes. I think that would be really, really helpful and useful, because it's using technology to automate something that allows you to focus on the higher level, one level up. That being said, like I use that every single day, and I go through it, and so many times I'm flipping through highlights from books, whether it's from a week ago or from 3 years ago or 10 years ago even. And new ideas start to connect as a result of that. And so I think it's finding the right approach to it. I don't think that note taking and note making has to be this manual thing. I do think that avoiding the collector's fallacy is a really good idea. The collector's fallacy basically boils down to collected knowledge versus applied knowledge. Collected knowledge is just the stuff that you would throw in Evernote because you thought it was interesting and you never came back to it. I was guilty of that all the time. Applied knowledge is the stuff that you've read, you've digested, you've thought on, and you're now creating with it. You're acting on it. And I agree on the like GPT style copywriting. I'm with you. I think there can be some interesting things and applications of that, but it does kind of remove some of the creative aspects of the work, Jason. But I do know that, in an estimated fashion, like 90% of creativity is iteration, 10% is innovation. And so when 90% of creativity is iterating on other people's ideas and other people's processes, other people's concepts, that's really all AI is doing, is taking other people's ideas and kind of starting that remix process for you. It can be a jump off point. It can't take, at least at this point, and I hope it never gets to this point, I don't think it can ever take away the actual process of connecting real ideas. So I think it's, exactly like what you're saying, Jason. You could use it to fight the tyranny of the blank page. Where do I start on this thing? I don't know. It can also could also give you a jumping off point to maybe do some further research. Like, oh yeah, the AI really came up with this interesting thought. I don't really know much more about that. Let me dig into that and see if it's actually relevant or factual. Because we know right now, too, that AI is a little bit difficult in that respect. You don't always know if the model is trained well enough to pull in factual stuff. So, yeah, it's really interesting in the space right now. I am very much a proponent, though, and I've said this for years, that you, as the person, are the center of your system. It's not Obsidian. It's not OmniFocus. It's not Todoist. It's not Craft. It's not Mem. It's not some AI software. It's not your Para system or your PKM system. It's not getting things done. It's you, because you're the one who's doing the thinking. You're the one who's doing the learning. You're the one who's doing the creating. You're the one who's making the decisions and making the connections. And so as a result of that, you become the center of the system. The system is an external support tool there for you to be able to enable you to work at a higher level than you were able to without it. And I would contend that if it doesn't help you work at a higher level, then it's probably not worth having. I was thinking about this in terms of automation in the Scrum training. Yeah, that's a good one. Scrum training, there was some talk about when you automate stuff, and you can automate to provide efficiency and effectiveness. Anyway, I actually have to wrap up here with the stream. So in just a second, hold on. Anyway, finish that thought, and I've got to hop off. But the automation aspects of things is that you can automate to help make more efficient and effective the things that become kind of tedious for people to manage on their own. And so I haven't traditionally been a fan of automation in a productivity sense, but it made me rethink it to say, okay, if there are lower level things that make it harder for me to do higher level things that I can automate, I should look at automating those. The trap I don't want to get caught in is that I'm now spending 80% of my time managing automations, because I've seen that happen. You spend so much time. It's the classic, I think we've talked about it on stream here before. It's the classic XKCD comic, which I'll pull up real quick. Here it is. The theory is that automation takes over and you have more free time, but in reality, the reality of it is that you basically are in ongoing development for that. Not always the best situation to get in. So if you can thoughtfully implement automation, I think that's a really positive thing. Anyway, I've got to head out. I'm actually a little late to get dinner going for tonight, so apologize to my family for that. But anyway, thank you so much for joining the stream today. I appreciate you coming along the ride here. Be sure to like it. Make sure it helps to help other people see it after the fact, and it also helps other people discover stuff at our channel. And if you haven't considered becoming a channel member here at Effective, feel free to do so. There's a button down below. It's join, and you can become one of the few channel members that we have and support the work that we're doing. I really appreciate your time this evening. Have a great rest of your night. Have a great holiday season coming up here, especially in the United States. We'll talk later. In the meantime, though, until next time, stay effective.